One of the wonderful things about the Championship is that I think we're seeing such a competitive promotion race at the top, which we've not had for a few years. I'm thinking back of the 18-19 season. Ironically, both Leeds and Sheffield United were in that promotion race. This year, I think you've got a real variety of teams that have really impressed for different reasons. You've got Leeds, who are this absolute chance creation machine and so dominant at home. You've got Burnley, who have been rock solid this season and on course to set a championship record in terms of defensive strength. You've got Sheffield United, who have shown a real resilience under Chris Wilder and the sort of leadership that he's shown. And you've also got this Sunderland team that's just jam-packed with incredible, phenomenal talent. And any of that four would be well placed to be, would be deserving to be in the top two this season. And it's a shame that at least one of them won't be in the Premier League next year. But I think we can say that the automatic promotion race is going to be two of those four. On the other hand, the relegation battle is pretty much anyone's guess at the moment, other than maybe Plymouth Argyle. But even them, it's going to be dependent on the appointment they make with Stephen Schumacher linked with a return. So, what we're going to do in this episode is our mid-season review. We're going to congratulate ourselves with me and my co-host Oli Mann for our good predictions. We're going to laugh at ourselves for our terrible ones. And we're also going to revise our predictions with some new ones based on what we've seen in the first half of the campaign. So, without further ado, plenty to get stuck into on this Championship podcast. Yes, welcome along to this Championship podcast here on EFL Debate. Get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify because that would help us out a lot. But for now, I'm delighted to be joined by my lovely co-host Oli Mann for the first time in 2025. Happy New Year, Oli. Great to see you as always. What have you made of the Championship season so far as a Sheffield United fan?
Yeah, it's been a really weird one. It's been a really difficult one because I think, some of those teams up at the top, I had Leeds and Burnley as my top two, so it's quite nice. We talked about congratulating ourselves and I'll give myself a big old pat in the back because I did predict those two as my top two coming in. But behind them, I've been really shocked by how competitive that other teams have been. I really didn't think United and Sunderland in particular would be as close to this race as that. I think there's been some real shocks in terms of overperformance. I'm looking at, we'll get into it, but I'm looking at Blackburn, I'm looking at Watford, and who we thought were going to be in that relegation battle really look to be miles away from it. They seem to be well clear. So how exciting the relegation battle is. I think you summed it up perfectly. Anybody could go down at this stage. You could give me a name from 10 teams and I'd go, yeah, that sounds about right. Actually, I could see them going down because it's just so competitive at the bottom. And I think it's going to be a really, really exciting second half of the season because, like you say, lots to play for at the top, lots to play for at the bottom. And even the playoffs, anybody could finish sixth. I reckon everybody will be looking at that position thinking, yeah, we could go on a run and get that. So much to play for. And I think it's going to be a really exciting sort of end to this season.
Do you know what I'm really excited about, Ollie? Normally what you see is the teams down the bottom are going to increase their points per game in the second half of the season because the stakes get higher and maybe the stakes also get lower for the mid-table side. So it tends to reduce. But at the moment, already the teams in the relegation battle, other than Plymouth Argyle, are pretty close to averaging 1 point per game. So I predict that it's going to be a relatively high points tally required to stay up. A little bit like maybe we had in the 12-13 campaign where I think Peterborough went down with 53 or something along those lines. So what I'm really excited about is I think the relegation battle is going to involve lots and lots of teams. So then I think there's also going to be lots of teams that are possibly taking points off the big teams and the playoff contenders as well. So it's shaping up for a glorious second half of the season from a neutral perspective.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. And I think you're right with that shout about how many points it's going to take to get relegated because to guarantee that if you said to me, you've got 50 points, do you think that you're safe? I would not be feeling confident for anybody right now. Like, you've got to get yourself to 55 because that's probably the line that you're going to need to be at because everybody is capable of winning 3-4 games in a row. We've seen all the teams at the bottom. Even Plymouth can put together a run. We've seen their form at home.
Well, Argyle might put Schumacher. If they put Schumacher, it's a completely different game, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's really exciting for me. I think if Plymouth, they got it all wrong in the summer. They made an absolute nightmare of it. But if they bring Schumacher back in, there's a real chance that genuinely I couldn't confidently predict any of the bottom three, because I really feel that strongly about how much of an impact Schumacher can have going in at Plymouth.
Well, having said we couldn't confidently predict any of the bottom three, let's confidently predict. let's reveal what we've gone for. So this is both of our updated predictions. I mean, I suppose the interesting one is that we've gone the one. I think we agree on almost everyone in terms of, you know, a few places either way, which you'd expect, seeing as we're already halfway in. We kind of know where teams are at. But the big outlier in terms of the difference between us is Stoke City, because I think Stoke City are going to put a run together under Mark Robins and finish in the top half, and you think they might go down. So I'd love to hear from you, Ollie. What's your case for Stoke City getting relegated?
Stoke, because of how dysfunctional they are, because I think that they are just in a constant rut and a decline and almost a managed mediocrity over 5-6 seasons. And eventually that mediocrity just seeps into the entire club. And we've seen it already this season. They actually started okay under Schumacher. It wasn't pulling up any trees, but they were fine. They've then made this decision to get rid of him and bring in Pelach, and that has just not worked at all. That was a disaster of an appointment. It's seen them drop towards the relegation zone. I really like Mark Robins. I think Mark Robins is a fantastic manager, but I just don't really have any confidence that anybody can get it right at Stoke. I just think the club from top to bottom needs a complete reset, and maybe a relegation is actually the thing they need in the long run. But I'm looking at the other teams around them, and I'm looking at Oxford, and I'm saying, right, they've started to turn it on. They're getting better. They're looking to improve. I'm looking at Cardiff, and I'm thinking, well, Reeds have made a really big immediate impact, but they're stagnating. They're another one who were in my thoughts, but who I thought would be better than Stoke. I just couldn't pick anybody else who I thought had more question marks about them, because beyond Mark Robins, I don't see any reason for positivity at Stoke. I really just think they're a team that aren't built for this battle, that weren't prepared for a relegation battle. And as they see themselves dragged in, I think they're all panicking, everybody at the club. And I think that is just a recipe for disaster. So I'm really worried that it's not really about a manager or about an individual. This is about the club itself. And I just feel like they're in a constant state of mediocrity, and you can't ride that wave for too long without it being a complete disaster.
By the way, I love the word mediocrity when it's pronounced in a South Yorkshire accent.
We do our best for, words.
No, look, Ollie, you make some brilliant points. I think Stoke City, since they've come down to the Championship, have thrown away about £150 million if you include transfer fees and player wages. Luckily, they do have wealthy owners, so they do have some leeway in that regard because of the Coates family, but it's a massive worry for me in terms of the infrastructure. But that's also part of why I quite like the Mark Robins appointment, because as much as you want to back your sporting director in Jonathan Walters to oversee the club and make the right decisions, he's very inexperienced and he doesn't have an amazing reputation sort of elsewhere in the game. As a sporting director, he might continue. He might do that in future, but at the moment, that's not. He's very inexperienced, and what I think Mark Robins brings is a real pedigree in terms of knowing how to run a club, in the sense that that's kind of what he had to do at Coventry City, and I think he's a big picture manager. So he'll be looking to James Rowberry and to Nevin as the coaches to sort of be on the grass and focusing on the detail with the players, and Mark Robins will and I think it's that sort of impact and how we can assess the trajectory of the club culturally and strategically that I think is going to make a difference for Stoke. And also there's a bit of confidence in him because of what he's done for over so many years consistently for Coventry City. So for me, plus I also do think that there is some potential in this squad when you look at some of the players that they've invested in. I do think pound for pound they've got some potential there. So that's why I see Stoke putting some form together.
I can see it, and I can completely, like I say, you could tell me that teams that I've got bottom, you could tell me they'll finish anywhere up to about 14th, and I'll go, yeah, maybe, there's a chance. But for me, already this season, I think they've got the second worst XG conceded. They are so reliant on Victor. Now, everybody who's ever listened to me speak will know that I love Victor Johansson, and I think he's probably the best keeper in the league, pound for pound. But You cannot just continue to rely on him. We saw that with Rotherham. He's having to do so much work. He's saving so many shots. He's facing so many shots. They've got a completely disorganised defence that Robins has got to do something about to reorganise and to structure. I just think there's so much work to be done by a group of players who have chewed up and spat out so many good managers. You know, I look at some of the people who've been in at Stoke. I look at Schumacher, you know, go back years and look at who they've had in the club. And you think, what, they've just chewed them up and spat them out, and nobody has been able to stabilise them. I've looked at their appointments so many times and gone, this is going to be the one. This time they've got it right. This time they're going to be in the playoffs next season because they've got the right manager and they're going to spend loads of money. But they just don't do that. And I wonder if it's culture. There's a massive job on for Robins. I think the job he did at Coventry is probably the best done in the EFL over the last 20 years. It's insane how far he's taken them, that they were, within penalties of getting to the Premier League, within penalties of getting to an FA Cup final. But to do that at Stoke takes so much work, and he's not got years and years to get it right. He's got 4 months to try and keep him in this division because they're just on a massive slide.
Yeah, they certainly are. And I think January is going to dictate a lot if they can bring in some players to sort of steady the ship a little bit. But I think Johansson is going to be a really important player for them in the second half of the season. And hopefully he can win them a few points. Maybe there's a truth somewhere between both what, our perspectives and it might be.
I've gone 22nd. You've gone 12th. They'll finish about 16.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's probably
what we'll do, Gabby, is we'll say, as a podcast, we got them spot on.
Yeah.
We'll split the difference, say that we nailed it.
We'll do the NTT20 style, I think. So, any that you'd like to challenge me on in terms of predictions? Because I suppose
Come on, Gab. You've got to defend it. I made you defend it in the summer. I'm going to make you defend it again today. You're on a much stronger footing than you were in the summer. Yeah. I admit I got Sunderland wrong. Okay. But tell me, please, why you still think they're going to win the league.
Well, it's partly that I like to sort of copyright my predictions, so that if it happens, I've never wavered from it. No, I think, joking aside, I think that there's some phenomenal talent in that squad. Like, I think Chris Rigg and Joe Bellingham are 2 players who I think are on an extraordinary upward curve. And I've got a huge amount of confidence that that's going to continue in the second half of the season. I think that they've managed some periods where they've been without a few key players and injuries have struck, and they've shown that ability to dig in and get a point from somewhere, or manage to grind out a 1-0 win when they've needed to. I think the fact that it's a squad that's grown together over the last couple of years makes a big difference as well. I expect them, I think they've already got a pretty clear best 11 whilst also having a few players on the bench that can make a difference, and I expect them to strengthen it in January. Massive fan of Dennis Serkin. I think he's had a great season so far at left back. Chris Mepham as well has been brilliant. You look at I think Regis Lebris, as much as he's tried to keep a consistent best 11, he's also showed some adaptability because he paired Mayenda with Wilson Isidore last time out, and that worked really well because Mayenda fed Isidore, a little bit like a 2 up top, if you like. So I think there's some flexibility that Lebris has shown. I'm really happy with what I've seen so far from Sunderland, and I expect that to continue in the second half of the season.
It's interesting because I came into the summer and I had Sunderland 10th. I got that all wrong. Hands up.
Do you know what 10th would have been a fair prediction? Yeah.
So now I'm then looking at them, but I've still got them 4th. Of this pack of 4 that are at the top, I've still got Sunderland sitting 4th. Mm-hmm. And I look back at my notes in the summer, and my key questions were, in terms of the Sunderland squad, they look okay, quite young. Are the young players going to be able to step up? There's a big tick in the box there. Those players have stepped up massively. They've overcome that kind of age barrier, and they look really, really strong, really talented. So much to go. Unproven manager. Well, Regis Lebris so far, fantastic job he's done getting them to this stage. I think I'm not willing to give the full tick because obviously there's a lot of the season left to go. But again, they've basically answered a lot of that question mark. The final question mark for me, though, still stays there. And that was, I said in the summer, I don't know if they've got enough goals in this squad. And I now look at Sunderland where they are now, and I think they've got 2 fantastic players who can play up front in Isidore and Mayenda.
Mhm.
But I also look at Mayenda, who plays a lot of games, and the amount of big chances that they're missing, that they're not taking, I think will be what probably comes back to bite them in those really, really key moments. I think that is, if someone could say to me that Isidore and Mayenda will play every game, that both of them will be fit, but also that they will take their XG. They won't underperform. They'll be exactly on where they need to be. I would probably buy into it a lot more, but I just think there's a gap there for me. I still think there's just that final piece of the puzzle is two fantastic players, but are they fantastic goal scorers? And I'm still not certain.
Yeah, it's a great point, isn't it? I mean, it hasn't been helped, I think, by the challenges that they've had on the left because Jack Clark, went into the season as their star man. He went to Ipswich, and then Romain Mundell did brilliantly, and then he got injured, and then Tommy Watson did brilliantly, and then he got injured. So it's been a difficult. I think they had to play Adil Ayakishe on the left last time out, and he was somebody who actually Regis Lebris wasn't a big fan of in his time at Lorient. So that shows they are a little bit limited there. So they could do with maybe looking at that area, or depending on how the injury situation is, depending on Mundell's return. So that's going to make a big difference, isn't it? And whether Patrick Roberts can, because I don't think off the top of my head Roberts has scored too many goals, has he?
No, he's not.
So maybe that. I can see your point there, but I think they have got a really strong defensive record where they're not going to concede more than one goal very often, and I think that's a really good starting point that gives them some strong foundations, and they've demonstrated a real team spirit where somebody like Dan Neil, the fact that he's still young, only about 22, but he's been in the team for 3 or 4 years now, and that experience has allowed him to kind of mature as a captain and become a bit more of a driving presence at the heart of that midfield alongside the talents of Bellingham and Rigg. I think Sunderland are going to get there, but I agree. I think they could do with adding a bit more guile in the final third.
No, I can completely see it. But let's stretch this one out then, because I think this one encompasses 4 teams that it's worth talking about. So if Sunderland are top, what do you think holds Leeds back? Because for me, I thought this was the most easy prediction I'm going to make all season. I thought Leeds passed the eye test as the best team in the league. I then checked the stats. They've got the best attacking stats in the league, most chances created, most XG, most shots on target. They've actually got the best defensive stats in the league in terms of the XG conceded and the chances that they're giving away. They've got the best squad that I can see in terms of going player for player. I also think they've got a manager who's got experience having won this league twice. Obviously, there is one big question mark in Leeds' team, and that is the goalkeeper. Is that what do you think is Leeds' gap? Is it just that you don't think Meslier is good enough and that's how they can be overhauled? Because for me, I go every week and I think I just don't see how Leeds ever drop any points. I know they do, and I know they've got these ricks in them, and I know they do have this mentality potential issue. But for me, they're runaway the best team in the league, and I actually think they'll win the league by a lot of points. I think they'll be clear come the end.
It's interesting. I can see why you'd go with that because they have been very strong. I think there's a few factors as to what. By the way, I'm saying Leeds get my top 2.
You have got them second.
Exactly. The goalkeeper situation, I think, is a problem because then it becomes more than just the shot-stopping ability of the goalkeeper and the individual sort of issues that can create in terms of the one at Sunderland or the one at Hull at the weekend. I think there might have been a mistake at Preston as well. But also, and that's dropped them sort of 6 points in games that they could have had more from, so 3 points instead of 9. And the other factor I would, but also the sort of knock-on effect of that is the nervousness around the goalkeeping situation in terms of how that affects the defence when they're sort of looking over their shoulder at the goalkeeper. And then that affects the confidence of the goalkeeper. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle. And then it also affects the opposition team because they feel like, if we can get some shots away at him, then it gives them some encouragement. So it depends a lot for me on how Leeds look to address that in January. You look like
Do you think they'll put Darlow in?
Say again?
Do you think they'll put Darlow in? Do you understand why they've not put Darlow in already?
I'm very surprised.
I can't believe he's not.
There must be some reason for it.
He must train horrendously because I can't see any other reason. Like Weeks ago, I was saying, just put Darlow in. Like, surely this solves all of your problems. You've got a really good number 2 keeper. Give him a chance, let him develop through. Because, that's the only
do you know
problem
what,
I
Ollie?
see.
I also think that would probably benefit Meslier as well, because that it gets to a point where it becomes so intense and the pressure on him is so much. He almost needs taking out of the firing line and a chance to sort of take a breather, if you like. So, yeah, I think the goalkeeping situation's got to be addressed in January, but it's whether they get the right goalkeeper in. Difficult to get an experienced player, and other than Carl Darlow, it's difficult to get an experienced goalkeeper in January because, unless they're not playing for a Premier League club or, somebody might be out of match practice, you don't know whether they'll be able to get that signing right, or they go for a loan and those can be a bit of a lottery. So
I get that. So then Burnley and United are the two you've got missing out. I've got Burnley getting second. I know you've had question marks over Burnley all season. So my only defense of them is going to be this. You're completely right. Everything that you're going to say when you tell me why Burnley are the 4th best team out of these 4 teams is completely right. They're massively overperforming the data, both in terms of their defensive performance and their attacking performance. But my counter to that is that now we are 26 games into this season. We played 46 games the last time that Burnley were in the Championship. So over the last 72 games in the Championship, Burnley have consistently overperformed their data in every metric at all points. They did it consistently last time and it saw them win the league with, I think, over 100 points. They're doing it this time. It's seen them second and on a fantastic run of form at the moment. They've only conceded 9 goals, which is on for a record.
phenomenal.
It's absolutely insane that they've only conceded 9 at this stage. Why do you think that? What do you think changes to break that run that they're on? Because I saw them at Bramall Lane and they weren't the best team we've played. But the level of control that they put on the game after they'd gone 1-0 up was genuinely just, okay, this is a different level. Because they just basically said, right, we've scored a goal. You're never going to get one. You can try. We'll play all week if you want. You're just not going to score against us today. And so that, to me, really elevated them in my mind. And I think, while it looks unsustainable in the data, I actually think they're so well coached that they might be able to keep it going just like last time.
It's a great question. I do understand that, because it is when you get to this stage of the season and they've consistently been able to churn out those clean sheets, the sorts of comments that we might say in October, like they're due they can't sustain this, they're due a plummet. Yeah. It carries a little less weight because they've just continued to do it for over half a season. Like that counts for something. At the same time, I think they are due a little bit of variance. I think there's going to be games where you might feel like you can have a shot, but we're not going to concede. But then, there might be times where the opposition has a shot and it sort of ricochets in and it wrong foots James Trafford. And also, I wonder whether, if you're in this habit of keeping clean sheets, it adds to a certain level of confidence. But then, if you go for a game where if that defensive resolve goes in one game, does the whole mask of invincibility start to come into question a little bit? Because what I think is more sustainable is a rate of chance creation. So, for instance, Leeds are able to create chances at such a consistent rate where, even though they have these issues in the goalkeeping department, because the collective is so strong and because they've shown these repeatable patterns of creating chance again and again and again, I think it's sustainable through a game where it doesn't quite happen. Whereas I think, because Burnley's, yes, you can be brilliantly organised, but also you're sort of relying on the opposition not being very good as well, because and them not being able to come up with an answer. And I think that if opposing teams, because it's a bit more, because defending, it's a little bit more about what the opposition do than what you do, or it's only more so than it is going forward, where it's a bit more about what you do than what the opposition do. So that's my concern with Burnley. Look, James Trafford has been outstanding this season. I love Maxime Estev and CJ Egan-Riley, Josh Cullen at the base midfield, Bashir Humphreys, I think, has got a huge future. Connor Roberts, so reliable. I do love their defensive record, and it's absolutely phenomenal. But I do think that there's going to be a little bit of variance where they might regress closer to 1 goal a game.
Yeah.
And then it's whether they can start creating chances to score twos and threes and continue to win games. And I'm not sure they've quite got that in their locker.
Interesting. So the last team of the four. So both of us vote Leeds are going up. We're both fairly confident Leeds are going to get automatics. I've gone Burnley. You've gone Sunderland as the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of us have backed United. Now, no team so far this season has won more points on the field than Sheffield United have. Despite that, neither of us think that they'll be good enough to make the automatics. So I'll go through why I don't, because obviously I am a United fan. I spend most of my times flying the flag for United and why we're brilliant. But the reason I've gone for United in third is it's the squad depth. I think there's too many question marks and too much business that United need to do. Someone put it to me the other day. They said, has a team that needs as many signings as United do ever been in such a fantastic position to go and attack the second half of the season? Because I was legitimately sat there saying, yeah, I think we need 5 or 6 to be properly up there. 5 or 6 in January, you know, we probably need a centre-half now that we've lost Suter. We need a central midfielder because we can't make do when Finney Souza's not available. We definitely need a striker, probably a left winger. I'd take a right back to be a bit more attacking. And suddenly, half the team I'm talking about needing replacement. And I think that's because we have dragged absolutely every inch of quality out of some of the players in this squad. You know, City Peck.
Like Wilder was emotional, Ollie, talking about how the players have dug in so well.
It's been incredible. City Peck deserves all of his flowers because this kid is an under-21 who should be out on loan in League Two probably, just learning the game, getting used to playing men's football. And yet he's playing week in, week out, every game for United at the minute. And he's a standout player who's probably man of the match against Watford, but he's so far ahead of his development. The same for Femi Siriki playing right back. He couldn't get in Rotherham's team being relegated from the Championship last season.
He couldn't get in Rochdale's team a couple of years ago. But,
couldn't get in Rochdale's team. And suddenly this season for United, he's a standout player. And we're saying, Jesus, he probably needs to be starting at right back. And the overperformance of these players is incredible. But for me, it's not sustainable. We need recruitment in January. We've got the new owners, but that's a huge window and a huge if that says if we can get this right, United can chase down and finish second. But that's what is holding me back from fully committing to automatic promotion. Is it the same for you, Gab, or do you see something else that I've missed in terms of my United coverage?
I really like what Chris Wilder has done. I love the connection that he has. I love how the best 11 has kind of battled through. You look at the bench, and again, kind of is repeating what you've said there. But you look at the bench. I mean, I might read it out actually. The bench that you had Watford. I know.
Bring me out of the cold sweat, Gab.
Just to emphasise it, you had Jamal Baptiste, Ben Blacker, Harry Boyes, Ryan Brewster, Adam Davis, Faxon, Louis Marsh, Sam McCallan, and Reece Norrington Davis. So of those players with championship experience, you would say Sam McCallum, Adam Davis, Reece Norrington Davis, and Ryan Brewster. A few of those are pretty out of form, if we're being truthful. And then there's plenty of, one of them is Adam Davis, who's a goalkeeper. He's probably not going to come on unless something goes wrong.
My favourite thing about that bench, Gab, is that's 2 goalkeepers and 3 left backs.
I know, yeah. But then also, Baptiste, Blacker, Boyes, Faxon, they've all come through the youth system. I mean, Harry Boyes isn't that young because he has had a few loans now at Solihull Moors, Wycombe Wanderers and Lincoln City. So, he's a little bit further along, but it is very limited. So that's, in terms of the strength of the bench, I mean, I don't know whether you've got a few players to come back like Oli Arblaster and Vinicius Souza that can make a difference.
Yeah, there's 5 coming back in. So Arblaster's out for the season, unfortunately. He's just completely done for the season. But in terms of players, so for Norwich, I think we're expecting to have back into that Vinicius Souza, Tyrese Campbell. Kiefer Moore wasn't there on Saturday, so hopefully he'll be back in as well. Jezrak Saki will be back in, who obviously is a massive loss, and we spent quite a bit of money on his loan in the summer. But yeah, so there's sort of 4 or 5 to come back in, but that still don't fill his bench. We're still, Ryan One started that game. So, we're talking about the experience on the bench. we started with Ryan One up front, who is a fantastic talent, but he's 18 years old. It's his second ever start. And there's so many gaps running through this squad that, the job that Wilder's done cannot be underestimated. It's been insane that we're even in this conversation at this point, to be honest.
Yeah. But I do feel, tell me if I'm overstepping the mark a bit here, Ollie, but I do feel like as a result of these issues with the squad depth and the injuries, it's maybe led to a drop-off in performances because, like you saw one of the games against Plymouth Argyle in mid-December where you won 2-0, but it wasn't a great team performance.
We were awful that day.
Yeah.
Absolutely awful. Plymouth battered us.
Yeah.
Plymouth looked brilliant. All of a sudden, I was sat there, I was fully converted. I was like, Wayne Rooney's keeping them up. They're great.
So that's, and then won at Cardiff, but then after that, we have seen them struggle in some of those big games. I mean, to be honest, that the playing in the festive period, playing the level of opposition that you did probably didn't help you either.
No.
So, yeah, I think January is going to be huge.
It is, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about this season. So we lost away at Leeds, lost away at Borough, lost at home to Burnley, lost away at Sunderland. So of the top 5 so far, the only game we've won was Sunderland at home. And I think anybody who watched that game might have suggested that it were a somewhat fortunate 1-0 victory that we got away with on the day. So certainly the performance level in those big games as well is going to be something to keep an eye on in the second half of the season. But hopefully it's recruitment and hopefully that's what makes the difference. But I can understand why we've both got us third rather than looking at maybe anything a little bit better than that. However, that does bring me to a really nice segue, Gab, into, I think we both agree Middlesbrough are going to finish 5th. There's no need to focus too much on that. But if Sheffield United do finish 3rd, I think I've predicted the worst thing that could possibly happen in the history of the world. And genuinely, I think I'll quit football. I just don't think it's worth it because I've gone for Sheffield Wednesday to finish 6th. And rather than me defending that decision, can you please tell me why I'm wrong and why it'll be West Brom? Please.
So I saw Sheffield Wednesday against Millwall at the weekend, and I was pretty impressed with them because they build up with a 3-2-5 shape that can sometimes become a 2-3-5. But what I really like is, whereas you get some teams that say they have a set configuration of the in possession shape. So, for instance, the left back's always going to invert into midfield, or the right back's always going to tuck in, or whatever. What Sheffield Wednesday do, which I think is really interesting, is while they have a set shape, the configuration of that shape is flexible. So sometimes the 3 at the back in possession is going to be Barry Bannon dropping in to the left of Dominic Iorfa and Deschamps Bernard, and sometimes it's going to be Max Lowe, the left back, sort of tucking in. And what I think that allows is lots of this lovely synergy where there's sort of clear patterns of play and everyone knows their roles and responsibilities on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's a flexibility, there's an unpredictability that opposing teams can't quite pin down. And I think that shows brilliant coaching from Danny Röhl, who I think has enormous potential as a coach, and I think he can go on to the very top. But the other thing I like about Sheffield Wednesday is they don't shoot from outside the box very often. They focus on creating those real clear-cut chances. And even if they don't create like a super high volume of them, that's you've still got a better chance if you can create 3 or 4 clear-cut chances than raining 30 shots from outside the box through a crowd of
best XG created in the league.
They're
very good, looking very strong going forward. Obviously, a lot of rumours. I'm not saying that I'm begging them to be true, but obviously a lot of rumours that Josh Windass could leave, which nice, please.
What's the rumour speed? Where would he go?
Santos in Brazil. So this sounds utterly insane. But is it Pedro Caixinha, who used to be at Rangers? He went to Argentina a few years ago and was rumoured to be bringing in Josh Windass, tried really hard. And then Windass's contract is up. I think he's got a 1+1, but his contract technically runs out in the summer. And the rumours that are coming around the Sheffield media today is that he signed a pre-contract agreement with Santos, and they're currently negotiating a transfer with Wednesday to see whether or not he can be moved over there. So it's a really interesting one. Obviously, you don't know if it's going to play out, but obviously he's a huge part of their fantastic attacking movement, the way that they've been creating. But yeah, I suppose the question mark on Wednesday is defensively, isn't it? That's the big question.
Well, there were certainly one or two imperfections that led to them conceding those goals against Millwall. But I also feel some of it's, and I think Danny Röhl said that in his post match. But I also feel there's a little bit of outcome bias because if Honeyman's 1-on-1 is saved by Beadle, and if Wintel's shot from outside the box gets skied over, we're probably not mentioning the defensive imperfections as much. If you keep a clean sheet, sometimes those things can kind of get glossed over a bit more. I thought that Millwall were very lucky to get a point that day. I thought Sheffield Wednesday were the clear better side. They've one or two things to work on defensively. I would say they're maybe 2 or 3 players away from being a top 6 side, which is why I've got them 8th. But definitely, as long as Danny Röhl stays, they're definitely a team to watch in the Championship, whether it's this season or next.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It does feel like there's a real positive momentum. So they did get in the playoffs. I wouldn't want to be, unfortunately, I think we might be the team that had to, but I would not want to be the team going to Hillsborough.
I would also feel like Chris Wilde would probably regret saying a few of those things that he did when he went to the pub.
I don't think he does regret. I think we'll just own it and go again.
Even if you get battered at Hillsborough.
It doesn't matter. We have to stand by it. Sausage rolls all the way.
Sheffield Wednesday fans are going to be waving sausage rolls at the Chris Wilder. It's going to be horrendous.
Wilder would love it. It'll thrive. If they do that, I'd be more confident that we actually do all right than I would be otherwise. What I don't want is them taking the high road. I don't want any high road in. I don't want them coming in being like, you thought you were funny, now it's 5-0. That'd ruin me.
Oh, brilliant.
So you've got West Brom taking that last spot. Now I've got question mark. I've got West Brom 7th, so I'm not miles away. Obviously very close in terms of where we think and how tight we think this is going to be. I've gone Wednesday, West Brom, Norwich. You've gone West Brom, Norwich, Wednesday. So we've obviously got an idea of who we think is going to be in that chunk, just in and outside the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Why do you think West Brom are the one that nicked that last spot?
Well, I saw them against Preston North End on New Year's Day. I was going to say at the weekend. My days and times over the festive period have got so messed up. But they didn't make a little bit of a pig's ear of it in the second half, and it wasn't quite as comfortable as it might have been. But what I loved about them in the first half is they seem to have that balance that seems to have continued from Carlos Corberan's reign, in that they can keep they can build play quite patiently at times, and they can create chances, but also when they need to drop in and be compact and sort of ride out a bit of pressure, they're able to do that. And I think that sort of balance is a trait of the Carlos Corberan side. Now, of course, Corberan's gone to Valencia. I'm almost wondering whether until the end of the season, having an internal appointment until the end of the season might actually work for West Brom, because what I'd worry about is if they appointed somebody like Luke Williams, who is maybe less defensive focused as a coach, they would actually lose aspects of the solidity that has allowed them to avoid defeats so rarely under Carlos Corberan, and they would maybe lose some of that balance. So I think what's really important for them is that whoever they appoint is kind of on board with that and is kind of not really going to change too much, because I think it's a time to not reinvent the wheel. So if they make the right appointment and don't try and mess things up too much or destabilise what's already in place, then I think they're in a good position for the top 6, merely because there's possible question marks over all the other sort of contenders, because there's such a big gap from, say, 4th or 5th downwards.
No, I completely agree. And I think the top 5 I'm 100% on. Whatever order they finish in, we know they're going to be the top 5. Yeah. I think that middle group around the playoffs is so hard. I do think we should have a word for Blackburn. I think in both of ours, they're the most improved team. I've got them 13 places higher than I had them in my pre-season. You've got them 14 places higher than you had them in your pre-season. Neither of us think they're going to make the playoffs, but undoubtedly finishing 10th, which both of us have gone for, that's a huge success for Blackburn, isn't it? I cannot believe how good a job that Eustace has done. I think I'm saying that Danny Roll has done the best job with his current club of anybody in the Championship. I'm probably putting Cifuentes second, but I think Eustace is third. Because I think Blackburn not even being close to a relegation contender this season is a massive success for the job that he's done.
I think what we'd say, Ollie, is that Blackburn are probably the biggest surprise, because while Danny Roll is doing a phenomenal job, I love Cifuentes. There's other managers that we could sort of pick out. I think just because no one saw it coming at all from Blackburn, whereas Cifuentes and Roll showed what they could do last season. Yeah, exactly. So I would say, I think Eustace is kind of surprising us most, perhaps, which as a Birmingham City fan, I probably shouldn't have fallen for that. But I think it just goes to show like how Eustace has brought everyone together. I think in Ainsley Pearce, below, I would say maybe Victor Johansson, Michael Cooper and James Trafford. I think Ainsley Pearce is very much in that next bracket below in terms of the best goalkeepers in the Championship. I think Danny Barr and Dom Hyam have forged a really good partnership. And then I think Sandro Tronstad is becoming one of the best midfielders in the league. I'm not sure they're quite going to score enough goals to get into the playoffs, but great work from John Eustace. And well done to him.
Yeah, completely agree. I think Blackburn are arguably the story of the season, because I thought that off-field instability was taking them apart. The squad looks really weak on paper. When you think about the players they've lost, Sammy Smodic's leaving, and them not really reinvesting at all in getting more goals into the team. So, I think it's just an incredible story. Shall we go from one incredible story to the other? Because the team that we've got, well, I suppose there is a contender for the team we've got equally most wrong.
Yes, Watford.
Well, I was going to say Luton.
Luton, of course. Yeah, the other way. Yeah. Should we talk about? Well, we'll talk about either way of Hertfordshire or Bedfordshire. I think. I've been really disappointed by Luton this season. I think that there's been a real imbalance to them. I was kind of hoping that they would play with this template where you've got Carlton Morris and Elijah Adebayo up, really pressing up top. You've got two attacking wing backs, but I think the area where they've kind of fallen down is central midfield. I don't think they've had enough of a grip hold on midfield in their games this season. I think when they press teams into submission at home, they can sometimes do that quite well because they play with sort of three attacking players. But then I think away from home, they seem to just get completely overrun in midfield. And I don't think Rob Edwards has got the balance right all season. So, I mean, that's a massive disappointment for me. I had Luton 5th before the season. I think you had them 4th. Yeah. So I think I've got Sheffield United and Luton completely the wrong way around this year.
Yeah, it's possible. I think what's interesting there, though, both of us we've both said that Luton have been the biggest disappointment. We both got them so wrong in the summer, but both of us still think they're going to be fairly comfortable and well clear of any relegation trouble. Now, I was talking to, I think it was Hugh Davis the other day, and he was saying that he's got them actually in his interim bottom 3 at the minute. When he's looking at the second half of the season, he thinks they could be in a real mess in terms of relegation. Why do you think they're a cut above those teams? Because I said that they are probably in that chunk of teams, that chunk of 10 teams who, if you told me they'd go down, I would be sort of, I can see it. I can see where you're coming from. And yet I think they'd be the biggest surprise of the bunch, because they just seem like a club that gets so much right. Surely they're not going to let this continue to fail.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I've only got them a couple of places higher than they are at the moment. So it's not as if I'm predicting like this massive rise into the top half, because I've not seen enough for that.
No, same.
I think on balance, their home form has been a relative positive so far this season. I also think that you put Mark McGuinness, Elijah Adebayo, Alfie Doughty when he's fit, possibly Marvellous Nakamba, Carlton Morris. I think there's enough players there. I think their squad's just about good enough with the right additions to maybe string some form together at some point, whether that's under Rob Edwards or dare I say possibly someone else. But I think their squad is a little bit of a level above maybe some of those teams that we're worried about.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I'm looking at our bottom threes there, and we both agree Plymouth at the bottom. We both agree that Derby will take one of the other two slots. And I think for me, Luton do just seem so far clear of that. It feels almost a double dip is just not something that was on my bingo card for this season. And I think Luton have got the quality in their squad that I'm expecting to shine through to keep them just away from trouble. But the fact that we're even considering it at this stage is a sign of how poor their season has been and how huge a drop-off it is. I think their summer's going to be huge, isn't it? Are they in the new stadium next season, or is it the year after?
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask Lewis Williams.
Yes, we'll check in with Lewis, because obviously they've been doing a lot of work to make sure that they're prepping for that new stadium, but they don't want to be moving into that in League One, because that would be an absolute disaster. Similar to the Everton situation in the Premier League. They don't want to be moving into their new stadium in the Championship. Luton do not want to be in League One. So hopefully a big second half of the season will make sure that they're not in any trouble come May, because I think it'd be a real disaster for the club if they were.
Yeah, what I look for because the bottom 10 is so close, you could go for anyone up to around, in my table, anyone up to around QPR or Preston North End to possibly go down. Don't forget, it seems unlikely QPR, the form they're in at the moment, but even at the start of the season, that was a massive fear for their fans. So you never quite know what's going to happen. What I like to look for is either these incredibly talented coaches like Ruben Selles, who's been honing his craft since he was 16 years of age, and has that massive head start on those sort of high-profile ex-players, or you go for your experienced Championship managers like your Mark Robbinses or your Gary Rowett's that you're just super confident in. So that's kind of the thought process that I look at, and I suppose we don't know yet who Plymouth Argyle have got as manager, so if they appoint Schumacher, that might change. But Cardiff have got Omar Ritza, who I think is a decent coach, but I think they've got fitness issues. Derby, I'm concerned about because I don't know if I have enough trust in Paul Warne at this level. Love him in League One, but at this level, I think there's a question mark. Whereas you look at somebody like Gary Rowett, who's done it season in, season out, you just can't go against him, can you?
No, I completely get it. You know what? I think of all of my predictions, and this feels harsh, and I don't mean it in the harsh way it sounds, but the prediction I hate the most of all the ones I've made is Oxford to stay up. I really hate it. I really wish that I wasn't predicting it and that wasn't what I believed, because Des Buckingham did such a fantastic job. A boyhood Oxford man who'd been there for so long, did an incredible job getting him in the Championship, deserved all of the patience, all of the time to really craft his squad, to really work with this as a long-term project at Oxford. The fact that he got the sack really doesn't sit right with me. It really just feels like that's exactly what you don't want to see in football. And I really don't want to see it rewarded. And yet, I really think it will be, because I think Gary Rowett is a fantastic appointment. I think he's a step up. I think he'll get the most out of this squad. You can see from the start that he's made that he's just had an immediate impact in getting them to be more competitive, to be better. And I know for a fact that I would not be sat here if Des Buckingham was manager predicting that they'd stay up. They would have been probably 24th in my prediction if he was still the manager. And I hate the fact that that's true. But Gary Rowett, we know what he's doing, and it's probably going to be proved to be the right decision. But I'm just really angry that it is.
I know exactly where you're coming from. I think there's a bigger range in the long-term future of Des Buckingham than for Gary Rowett, because Gary Rowett's always going to be a consistent 7 or 8 out of 10 Championship manager. I don't think he's necessarily, I don't think he's necessarily going to do it in the Premier League or make amazing waves at the top of the game, because I think at that stage it just feels unlikely, doesn't it? Whereas I think Des Buckingham, I think the sky is the limit for him because of the potential he's shown, like I've talked about, coaching for 20 years. And I think he probably made a mistake not going on holiday after the playoff final win over Bolton Wanderers and maybe giving himself. So I think Des Buckingham could be anything in his managerial career, but what Oxford need at the moment probably isn't a manager who could be anything. They need a manager who they know they can rely on, and I think they can rely on Gary Rowett because I've seen it with my own eyes.
No, I agree. It just makes me very sad, Gab. It just makes me sad. On Derby, so Derby fans might feel, anybody who's a Derby fan watching, they might feel a little bit hard done to. They've had a pretty good start to the season. this first 26 games, they've done really well. That home record looks really strong as well. Their underlying metrics are competitive. They're not in the bottom three for XG conceded, for points at home, for points away. They've had a pretty consistent and as good a season as you would have expected from them. The reason I've got them in my bottom two is that they're fixed. You've played everybody. Everybody's played everybody. But Derby's fixtures are quite skewed in terms of who they've played at home and who they've played away. So they've played Leeds, Burnley, United, all the top teams they've played away. And they've played all the bottom sides at home. Yeah. And so when that flips, they've got this fantastic home record where they're getting most of their points. As soon as that flips, when you've got to now, if you want more points at home, you've got to beat Leeds. You've got to beat United. You've got to beat Burnley. You've got to beat Borough. That's a huge ask. It's really difficult to pick up points in those home games. So all of a sudden, their away form becomes absolutely crucial. They've got to start picking up more points than they are in really difficult away, what's going to be battles. And they might fancy winning them, but I think that's why I've got Derby where they are. I think that the others, with their managerial choices, probably do have higher ceilings, particularly with Ruben Sellers coming in at Hull, with Rowett, like you say, at Oxford. But yeah, it was the fixtures that really skewed it for me, where I started to see just a little bit of an imbalance. And I thought they can't rely on their home form when the games they've got to come at home are as tough as they are.
Yeah, I think I'm a massive admirer of Paul Warne as a person. I think if I was a fan
Incredible man.
Yeah, if I was a fan of one of his teams, I'd be really proud to have him as my manager in lots of ways, because I think he's a real trailblazer for vulnerability and empathy in modern leadership, which is a real breakthrough, I think. His ability to galvanise people on an emotional and sort of ethical level, I think, is extraordinary. And I think he's got some incredible qualities there. And I think that's why we've seen him be extremely successful in League One, winning 3 promotions with Rotherham and 1 with Derby. I think once you get into the Championship, you come up against maybe a different level of coach. Either the coaches who have been studying since they were 16 and just super incisive and detailed and meticulous in the way they work on a technical level, or these experienced managers who have been there, seen it and done it for however long. And I don't know I don't know quite from a technical and tactical level how Paul Warne kind of stacks up to that. And that's why I'm a bit apprehensive about Derby, given, although they're in a decent position at the moment, they've actually also only won 3 of their last 17, plus those points that you make about their home fixtures in the second half of the season, I think could see them slide in there. So, yeah, I'm worried about Derby.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So we've sorted that. So top 4, we know they are. You think Leeds are going up. I think Leeds are going up. Then you've gone Sunderland. I've gone Burnley. I've got Wednesday in the playoffs. You've got West Brom in the playoffs. Bottom 3, we've both got Plymouth bottom. I've got Derby. You've got Derby going down. Then you've got Cardiff and I've got Stoke. They're the key areas, but I've got one question, Gab. Which prediction are you most embarrassed about? We've talked about the 2 that we've got most wrong, but I'm not embarrassed about getting those wrong. I think everybody would have got those wrong. Which one are you embarrassed that you got wrong?
Sheffield United.
I thought you were going to say that. That's why Yeah. It is one of them that when we look back on it, I'd got United 6.
Do you know what? Like Vinicius Souza being in the, one of the best midfielders in the Championship, you wanted him gone in the summer. I was expecting him to be hounded out as a disgrace to the Red and White Wizards, and all of a sudden he's. But yeah, look, Sheffield United have been brilliant, and I've got them and Luton completely the wrong way around.
Yeah, and I think it was one of them where, and to be honest, when you said it in the summer, I think we did this and I was like, yeah, I get it, I get why you've got United that low. There's so many. And, we've talked about those weaknesses. Like if you sat looking at the squad in the summer, no one sat there going, I'll tell you what, Vinny Souza and Sidney Peck's going to be best midfield in the league. Like, you're just not predicting that at all. So, yeah, but yeah, they do look a massive outlier on your list. Right. At least the ones I've got drastically wrong are generally mid-table, so nobody cares.
Which one, if you had to say one that you're most embarrassed about?
Watford,
really?
I think we both got Watford a quite bit wrong.
Yeah.
And you know what it is, though? I think I got suckered in. I got suckered into this narrative that had built with everybody. Because I even look at their squad and I'm thinking, that's a that's a pretty good. Like, we played them the other day. I was terrified. I was like, they've got Czech Patenzi on one wing, they've got Barr on the other wing, Bio up the middle. I'm looking at the defence and it's pretty solid. So I think I bought into a narrative on Watford rather than doing my own sort of analysis. I think that's what I've learned more than anything, because I think I got suckered for that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose Quadro Bar was completely no one saw Quadro Bar having the season because he was completely in the fringes, wasn't he? And even somebody like Fakun Bayo, what you wouldn't have expected him to be one of the Championship's top goal scorers this season, because he wasn't prolific previously. And you sign players like Sissoko, and with the attitude question mark, you make him captain, and it could have gone wrong, but I think Tom Cleverley seems to have maximised their strengths and built something very quickly there. So look, Watford have been good, and hopefully they can start and end the season with the same manager in charge, which would be a step forward.
It'd be something new, wouldn't it? I think that's it. I think we all just thought, Watford will sack a manager soon. They'll be fine. They'll implode again at some point. Don't worry about it. There's still time. There's still time. It's only January, so they could have another 3 managers between now and May. But yeah, I'm annoyed about my Watford prediction, because I had them getting relegated, I think, or at least very, very close to. And yeah, I feel a bit silly for it.
Yeah. One final question from me, Ollie. What's your take? How do you think Frank Lampard is going to do at Coventry?
Not well enough, I think, is the answer to that question. Not well enough. I think that, we touched on Mark Robins earlier and what a fantastic job he'd done. And the fact that 2 years ago, they were a penalty shootout away from the Premier League. Last season, they're a penalty shootout, or they're the smallest of small centimetres away from being in an FA Cup final.
Yeah.
We know they start slowly, but under Robins, there's a lot of confidence that they get up ahead of steam. And once they get going, they're an excellent team. Frank Lampard, I think, will do fine. I think he'll do par for the course. I think he will deliver you a 12th placed finish. I think next season, he'll probably deliver you an 8th placed finish. I think he will be able to get you to an acceptable level, but I don't think he's ever going to be able to get you overperforming. I don't think he's going to get them pushing for the top 2. I don't think he's going to get them challenging those top places where Coventry obviously want to be, and where after the last few seasons, they'll really think they deserve to be. I don't think he guarantees you a playoff spot. I think he makes you a potential challenger, whereas I think under Mark Robins, I always thought they will be in there. And I think it's a downgrade. I think they've downgraded from where they were this time last year. That's my concern.
Yeah, interesting. I agree. I'm not sure I would. Very early days and a lot to sort of assess in the second half of the season. But yeah, I'm not sure how confident I would be about Coventry being in the sort of playoff scramble under Lampard, obviously in terms of next season, because I just think that there's coaches who have had this 20-year head start on him, like a Danny Royal, for instance, or like a Ruben Selles. And I think that counts for something. If you've had 2 decades to sort of hone your craft, I think that makes a difference.
I completely agree. The only slight caveat to that, on this side of my screen, the only slight caveat to that one is the Chelsea question mark, which is that if he wants to in the summer, like he did when he was at Derby, will he get 3 potential Premier League superstars playing in the Championship for 12 months? Last time he got Tomori, who immediately went to AC Milan and became one of the best defenders in Serie A. He got Mason Mount, who then started for England about 3 months after leaving Derby. If he can get that caliber of player to come to Coventry out of Chelsea again.
When you think about how many young players Chelsea have got as well.
Yeah. So that could change the maths. There could be some huge talent that you play off the back of his reputation, of his relationship, and you get these incredible players who shouldn't be playing in the Championship. But on his own merits as a manager, I don't see it. And I think that, for me, would be a worry if I was a Coventry fan, because they've made such fantastic strides to be a consistent top 6 team I was expecting in the Championship. And I think they've probably thrown that away a little bit.
Perhaps, yeah. Well, listen, I think I've had a lot of fun discussing all the teams.
I've loved it.
Yeah, really
Love
enjoyed
doing
one
it, Gab.
one of my favourite pods. Thanks so much, Ollie. Really appreciate your insight from the Sheff United Way. Everyone gets subscribed to the good stuff over there. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Championship podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode half as much as we have, we would really appreciate it if you could get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out enormously. We'll see you again very, very soon.